Thank you, everybody, for joining us today with another episode of Your Double podcast with Find My Parent. Today, I'm joined by Amanda Sillers, who is based out of Brisbane, Australia. Amanda is the founder of Eeny, Meeny, Minnie Mo Foundation in Australia. She is a survivor of parental abduction and alienation. And she's working at the forefront with families on the ground in Australia and around the world who've been affected by alienation and or abduction. She also has a background in psychology with a bachelor's in psychological sciences. So thank you so much for joining us today, Amanda. Really happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your podcast. That's exciting.
I would love to just first understand, why you got involved in this cause. Why are you so passionate about helping families who've suffered from parental alienation and or abduction?
I guess where it sort of starts is back in 2012, I found myself in a situation that I didn't understand. And my children had been abducted interstate and they were now rejecting me. And I was unsure as to why or what I had done, for my children to be hateful or fearful towards me. And during like the court process, I, started to search online and, why is my child hating me? Why is my child rejecting me? And things like that. And I, there just wasn't a lot of information. And then it wasn't until a counsellor said to me, it was actually a court ordered handover. And she said to me, this is a textbook parental alienation case. And I had no idea. I never heard of it. I thought, alienation, you know what alienation is, parental, put it together. And that kind of makes sense. And she said, look, just get online and just try and Google, try use Google Scholar, see what you can find. And as I started to find things, I found some of Amy Baker's work. And that was the big starting point was some of the signs seen in the child, and it was like kind of ticking boxes, I was like, yep, all these. But then when I started to read a little bit more, I started to sort of have this feeling of this is really familiar. Like I've experienced this before, but as in being the child. And so that's when I was kind of like a little bit not a little bit actually, quite in conflict because I was like, wow, this happened to me when I was young and it's happening to my children and I didn't understand it, you know, when I was young. I had no idea that I'd been manipulated. Things just were how they were, kind of thing, and it's a kind of a gradual, I guess, your mind gets shaped little bit by little bit. You know how like stories can start to be revised and you kind of start doubting your own memories, and there's a lot of things like half truths and things that are told. So you get told a certain part of the story that you remember, but then there's a spin to it in a negative light. But then there's a lot of information that's missing from that story as well. So yeah, it was kind of it was a big learning adventure for me. Sort of had to realize that this is what I'm experiencing, this is what my children are experiencing, and yet there's very little information out there. There was no organizations that were talking about it. There was no booklet that you could download or, how to navigate guides.
So you were also alienated as a child?
Yeah, and manipulated into thinking that my mom was problematic, that there was a good reason why I was taken from her,
Mm.
and I remember in the very beginning, it'd be like you'd have like these moments of conflict, like inside you've got this feeling saying, well, I love mom, and I did lots of wonderful things with her and she was always there. But then when you're being told negative stuff, you're kind of like going, well, I don't know, like you kind of, and because there's a lot of, naturally you trust a parent to tell you the right thing and to be honest with you and that. But when they're not being honest and when there's a motive to, manipulate you to believe certain things, as a child, you're not equipped to handle that kind of manipulation or any of, coercion as such.
Yeah,
Mm,
I've definitely heard from many parents the exact same thing that you mentioned, that you had no idea what parental alienation was. It wasn't even on your radar until
mm,
after the fact, basically until you started, basically your children started being alienated from you and you started experiencing it. And then again, you didn't even realize it had happened to you as a child until you're already a mother and now become the victim of it. Children, the same, of course, as you mentioned, they're not gonna, if adults don't have it on their radar, why would children have it? So, are there like any, for any of our listeners who think they're being alienated, whether as a child or an adult child, a parent, even sometimes grandparents, we could say, or aunts and uncles, are there any like specific resources you would direct them to initially as they're trying to understand what is this exactly? How do I deal with this?
mm. Well, the first thing I say is, visit our website, etriplem.org.au, and you can start off on the home page and you can find a little bit more about. We're using different terminology these days with EMMM. We're using more of it's a survival-based rejection.
Yeah.
And so what it is, it's actually parent-child trauma, coerced attachment, and alienation. So it picks up on the trauma bond and how the child has been coerced into this unhealthy attachment with a problematic parent. And so they can learn all about things from, what it is, who does it, um, that it's not gendered,
Mm.
coercive control is at the heart of it.
Yeah.
And you can also learn about the characteristics of a person who alienates, from the problematic personality traits like narcissistic, borderline, histrionic, paranoid traits. And then you can, dive into the other factors which could be in play. There could be a high anxiety or over controlling parent. They may not have those B cluster sort of personality traits. It might be like micromanaging, over anxious about handovers and the other parent looking after the child, and lots of worry. So the child's a little bit like is more fearful and
Mm.
anxious rather than being hateful and entitled. So you
Mm.
kind of see like different kind of dynamics. So you kind of a big one that plays a huge part in these sort of cases is cognitive distortions. So these are really unhelpful ways of thinking that people who have got things like mental disorders or high anxiety, they may start to like be cynical about a lot of things and catastrophize things and kind of using emotional reasoning. Um, or overgeneralizing. There's a huge list on our website. If you actually go to the education section on the website, there's a drop down menu that you can go through and look at all the different components and different information. We've even got things about parental child abduction, intergenerational trauma, alienating tactics. It's it, it's the term parental alienation is basically an outcome. It's quite simplistic in a way. If you just say, I'm experiencing parental alienation without actually painting the full picture of what's actually
Mm.
going on. Unless you're an academic or a clinician that's specialized in this area, you go, oh yeah, I know exactly, I know the complexities and what you could be going through. But for someone who doesn't, somebody like could be a lawyer, might not even know what parental alienation is. And they might just go, oh, it's probably just a legal tactic or something like that.
Mm.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of information on the website that people can jump into and have a look. Yeah.
Good. So basically people should really go and explore a bit about why that alienation is happening, what are kind of the factors at play, and try to, to use that to educate themselves and those that are offering them services and support to basically get out of that situation, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and there's a section there which often schools get involved. They kind of get recruited by the alienating parent,
Yeah.
and I've done 2-page infographic kind of sheet that's kind of explains some of the dynamics that can happen when, the parent recruits, or the, so you've got a principal who, is got the similar sort of traits, or a teacher that might have the similar traits as a parent, and it's sort of like, that's it. Now it's all about us and them kind of thing. And it can be very destructive, especially if a child's like, their environment is made up of people who have this narrative against this other parent or person. They don't have the ability to speak freely or safely about their rejected parent or how they feel.
How common is this in Australia? I mean, I know that you work with families around the world, but I think still more than half of them, the majority of the families you work with will probably be based out of Australia. How common is this in Australia?
Extremely common. Like, even, most separations have a certain degree of alienation. There might be like residual feelings left over from the relationship. Like, they might be cynical towards the other parent, or, but then eventually they may, as time goes on, things may settle down and things go, back to sort of normal. But it's when they start to, ramp up, and places like the family court or child protection or things, even police, when there's that sort of involvement, they tend to accelerate really quick. But the prevalence is huge. I mean, it's so big, and we've seen a big increase after the lockdowns during COVID, and there was deterioration in people's marriages and relationships, and there's also learned cognitive distortions. When you're online all the time and you're scrolling through things, and there's a lot of, catastrophizing things and being cynical, and, people thinking that thoughts are facts and stuff like that. It's quite easy to learn these ways of thinking. And if a parent's like that, thinking these distorted ways, can imagine a child who, like monkey see, monkey do, and they're forever learning. They start to learn these ways of being, cynical, and blaming is a big one. Blame speak. Um, yeah.
Interesting. And do you think there are like any driving factors in Australia or things that are making progress? They're like basically obstacles. What is it that's happening locally that's contributing to this phenomenon of growing, cases of parental alienation, parental abduction?
Well, there's a lot of disinformation internationally about parental alienation. There's a camp of people who say that it's just a legal tactic for abusive fathers to take children away from protective mothers, which is, it can happen. It can happen. It can be an abusive mother or abusive father that's saying that they're alienated, but they're not actually alienated. So that can happen. But there was a study that was published, which is, from my understanding, that they haven't been able to replicate this study. There's been 3 other groups of researchers that haven't been able to replicate this study, which is, it's pretty damning if you can't replicate, a study. So there's a number of articles that, can support what I'm saying. But another thing is that there's this narrative within the courts to use what they call the high conflict model. So when they begin their assessment, they're actually starting off with a conclusion that these parents are both high conflict, which is disturbing, because you really need to do case conceptualization. So you need to look at like the history of each parent, history of the relationship, if there's any, any mental disorders, or if there's, I think I've actually put it in like one of the summaries on our website, like if somebody's got like an abnormal grieving response to separation, or the inability to accept their own problems, lack of insight, desire for control, desire for vengeance is a big one. People might be vengeful, so there's lots of different factors that are coming. And also there's a misuse of protection orders, violence restraining orders. Is that it's quite easy to go into a a police officer branch kind of thing and make a claim, you know, say an incident happened, or give them a lot of detail with a lot of emotion and confidence, you know. And, you know, in some states in Australia, you can get an instant restraining order. And there's one now here in Queensland, the police can issue a 12-month restraining order on the spot. So it's, you know, not realizing that the damage this can do to a parent-child relationship, but also to both of their mental health as well. You know, can you imagine not being able to see your child, and all of a sudden you've got this crime that's been, you know, claimed against you? Yeah, it's enough to send people over the edge.
So a parent in theory could go in and request up to a 12-month, a year-long restraining order, basically against the other parent and even for the children against the other parent.
They can have their
And
children listed on them. Yeah. Yeah, it's in Queensland is where they can take out it on the spot 12-month restraining order, the police can. Yeah.
and I think based on other conversations I've had with parents who've been alienated or their children have been abducted, 12 months may not seem like a super long time. And from an outsider, they might say, oh, you know, your child will turn 18, they'll come back to you. But the reality is that, especially younger children, but even older children, 12 months is plenty of time sometimes for that child to forget an entire language they spoke at a young age, to become disconnected with that culture if their parents are from two different cultures and backgrounds, to be disconnected from their extended family on the other side. So not just mom or dad, but also aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, to start creating negative thoughts of that parent, basically to be brainwashed so that even if after 12 months they are able to see that parent, they may come with a lot of negative thoughts toward that parent and not be super excited to see that parent. So
Mm.
12 months is a long time for the cases like
Yeah.
this.
And it depends on what they've been told. If history's been revised as being all bad with that parent, you know, and repetitive remarks have been made about the parent, or, you know, certain stories have been twisted, you know, children get quite confused and they can experience cognitive dissonance, which is where, you know, their thoughts and their feelings are conflicted. Like they will see the parent and like they might feel like a, you know, love for that parent, but then what they've been told is really negative. And they, you know, when you've been cut off from a parent like that, you experience this sense of like this grief and there's losses that are associated with that, and you can suppress positive feelings about a parent and then stay fixated on negative things about a parent. And so like they have all this emotional pain, but they don't really realize where that pain is coming from, but they're taught to blame the other parent. So that's how sinister this is that they don't realize where this pain is actually coming from because they have been manipulated.
Yeah, absolutely. That is exactly what I'm hearing from parents as well. So if anybody listening today is they think that they are being alienated, they are, you know, losing access to their children, or they feel that their children are being turned against them. And let's just say for simplicity's sake, they're in Australia. Like, what solid practical advice would you give them? Where would you tell them to start? And I know it's a huge field. There's lots of contributing factors, but in general, what would be your advice if a parent is to come to you and has concerns that they're being alienated?
I guess the big part is understanding the child's perspective first, because, you know, some people will react and say, oh, you rude little whatever, you know, call them names and think that they're just being really disrespectful, not understanding what's actually happening. You know, like when a child um, is being interrogated for information every time they come back from a visit, or if they've had a holiday with a parent, you know, if they're being asked the same thing again and again, the children will start to alter their responses because they think that that parent's fishing for something.
Yeah.
And if they're always fishing for something negative all the time, children will eventually tell them something negative. So they will tell, they may tell a like a half truth. They may have spent, I always use the example, the parent was at the swimming pool with the child, and they were in the pools, and then next thing you know, he had to quickly go check their phone for a message, and it was just work related, seeing if they're going to work later. But then the child has been interrogated by the other parent, saying, like, what did you do? And like, they've brought up this, they've got a text message. Next thing you know, the parent was on the phone the whole entire time, and they weren't watching the children in the pool. They were unsafe, and then it gets catastrophized, and they're not going on a visit the next time because they're not safe with that parent. So yeah, those sort of things can happen, and people don't realize that children can confess to things that didn't happen. It can be a flat out lie, and it can be a half truth, and it can be just giving under pressure. That's what happens. And there is a really interesting study which is called the mousetrap study. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it before. It's where primary age students were asked a series of questions over a number of weeks, and one question remained the same, and it was, have you ever had your finger caught in a mousetrap? And the first week, the children hadn't had their finger caught in the mousetrap. And by the second and third week, children started to come out to say that they had had their finger caught in a mousetrap. And then as the weeks went on, that they would elaborate. I think one of them said that their little sister had their finger caught in the mousetrap, or there was a mousetrap in the attic and things like that. So, like, naturally, children want to be helpful, but when you're being asked the same question again, you kind of you'll give in, and you'll tell them what you think that person's looking for, what information they're searching for.
Yeah. So basically these parents should push aside kind of their emotions, their feelings, and try not to overly engage with the children about kind of their relationship or with the other parent, or kind of fish for negative things about that other parent because it may not be true. And obviously we can probably agree that it's not helpful for the child, right? You're putting the child in a bad position.
They're already in a difficult situation, and sometimes they'll come out with things negative about the targeted parent, and then next you know it, the targeted parent spends their time trying to convince their child that they didn't do it. And it's like the other parent may be teaching the child that the only way that you can stay in contact with that parent is through conflict. And so
Yeah.
then you end up being in conflict, and the child starts to associate the phone calls with stress, interrogation afterwards, and conflict. And, they start shutting down and not wanting to speak to the other parent. And that's the same with, handovers, like when it's time to go visit the other parent. If one parent is really emotional and hugging them, going, I miss you so much, and you can call me tonight, and oh, I'm not sure what I'm going to do while you're away, and I get so sad. The child starts to associate going to see the other parent with all this emotional grief,
Yeah.
that they're worried that this parent's not going to cope when they're not there. And so children start to shut down to the other parent because they're too worried about the parent that's over emotional.
Yeah.
So there's so many different factors to think about, and as I said, like, this can start to happen in your relationship with your child and the other parent, and you might not realize what is really beneath all these layers.
What if it's the other parent that's doing this behavior, the other parent that's kind of fishing for negative thoughts, engaging the child on, the conflict in the marriage or between the two divorced people, the one that's very emotional at handovers? What if that's the other parent? What do you do as the parent who sees themselves as being more, and this may or may not be true, but being more stable emotionally and trying to have a positive relationship? How, and now you're divorced, you may have little influence over the other parent and the way they act, but at the same time, you don't want to see your child impacted negatively because of that parent's behavior. What would your advice to them be?
I think a big um, part of this sort of situation is just to be the stable one, staying calm, not reactive, especially at handovers. If a child sees that you're okay and everything's fun, and even mentioning, like, you're going to see mum later or your dad later, or just trying to be upbeat, and we can give him a call, and check in if you like. And because it's I mean, it just depends on the level that the person's getting to, and if there's a mental health factor as well in there. If somebody's getting really dysregulated about these visits, the child will pick up on that kind of behavior as well. And
Yeah.
some children get quite dysregulated, and depending on their ages as well, especially the younger ones, will really cling to, and they don't want to go, and they get really upset. Their vocabulary might not be, substantial, and it's very difficult. So sometimes having a more of a therapeutic handover, having a plan of how you're going to do handovers, that you say your goodbyes before you go and meet with the other parent, can make it a little bit easier, so the child's not stuck in this situation where their parents clinging to them and
Yeah.
getting upset or angry. I mean, I see some recordings online of some people go, "Oh, this was our handover," and they're yelling at each other, and this poor kid is just crying, and they're saying, "Look what you do to the child." And
Yeah.
it's like, oh my goodness, really?
Yeah.
You know, how unfair that is for the child to be stuck in the center of their parents' conflict, you know?
Absolutely. And I know it's hard for it would definitely be challenging to remain positive and upbeat when the other parent is not. And so
Mm,
some tactics I've learned from other parents who are in similar situations is they might if what they'll do is they'll write the response, like if they're communicating via email, text message, or whatever. They write what they feel, their response, like their real feelings, the screams, maybe even the bad words, it down to that parent, but they never click send. And
yeah,
that
that's good.
helps
Yeah.
them, then put on a happy face and kind of ignore because we can't expect that that parent is going to change overnight. And is the other parent going to make handover less dramatic? Maybe, maybe not. So it's on the
Mm,
other parent to stay positive, to have a stable kind of emotions, right? And so that's one tactic I've heard parents use. They do that. They feel like they got it
mm,
off their chest. It never went to anybody. It was never seen by anybody else except them, saved on their computer, whatever they want to do with it, written in a journal, whatever. And that helps them just kind of then ignore the other parent's behavior, negative behavior, bad behavior, and just keep putting on a smile and kind of staying positive for the child. So that's one tactic I've heard from a number of parents that they do to overcome this because we're
yeah.
we're human beings, we're emotional
Yeah, it's
people.
good to get off your chest, your thoughts. I used to do it in my phone notes. I never used to put in an email just in case you accidentally
Yeah,
sent
that's
it,
true.
or in the text message field, you just don't want to send it. And so I used to keep it in my notes, and then I'd sit on it for a few hours or the next day, and then I'd be like, yeah, after the dust has settled, I feel a lot better. And
Yeah,
but you don't want to be sitting there keeping a record of wrongs about the other parent, and criticizing them or telling them how to parent and things like that. You can't control what the other parent is doing. But I guess one thing that you can do yourself is create like a nice little, like after you've had a transition of the child coming to you, is having a little self-care practice, having something nice for them to do when especially if the child's really anxious or heated and things like that. Sometimes sensory stuff, like whether it's a nice walk along the coast, or going getting a nice cold drink somewhere, or some nice music, and just finding some sort of activity. But when you get to this, when the kids are just so heated and angry, some of the kids will come and they'll be so horrible to the other parent because they've been worked up, they've been worded up, and they've got this little record of wrongs in their pocket, when they're coming, and they're ready to tell you off for all the things that you've done. And sometimes it takes not just hours, but sometimes it takes days to get your child to be their authentic self. And by the time they're their authentic self, they have to go back to the other parent's house.
yeah.
So it's a lot to unpack, you know.
And from maybe more of like a legal standpoint, what would be your advice to parents in Australia? So we've talked about, how they need to manage their emotions and their reactions and how they treat the child to make the situation as good as it could be, right? Within their control. But like, what can they practically do from a legal perspective to actually mediate the situation?
Mm. Well, firstly, I can't give any legal advice because that's not my background, but I always recommend people to keep really good records, like date, time, what happened, and how it impacted the child. People usually just put what happened, but they don't put what impacted how it impacted the child, how their
Mm.
behavior was after this event occurred. And timelines are so crucial, because often there might be sort of certain dirty tactics or methods used prior to court dates or scheduled visits and things like that, is keep a really good record of the behavior. And often when I sit down with parents who, are telling me about different incidences that are going on or things that are being said, often they go back to cognitive distortions. You can almost go, okay, well, this is this type of cognitive distortion. It's quite interesting how they play such a big, role in alienation dynamics. And these days we're quite lucky because we do have AI, which is helpful with record keeping and things like that. But you've just got to be really careful because sometimes it does hallucinate,
Yeah.
like citations and things like that. It's made up citations. I've seen actually, apparently I've written a couple of academic articles that are peer reviewed, but I haven't. But it's just put my name in there. Somebody said, I didn't know you wrote that. And I was like, I didn't know I wrote it too. So must have done that in my sleep or something. But yeah, it's really important. Like the moment like someone's child is being withheld, people are often like told by lawyers is they've got to obviously present their stuff to their lawyer, their documents to the lawyer and what's happened, but they'll keep evidence and they'll say, oh, we'll keep that up our sleeve for trial. And a lot of times I see them not doing recovery orders.
Mm.
Recovery orders, from my understanding, is supposed to bring order back into the parent-child kind of custody arrangement, what's been agreed, whether there's parenting orders or it's agreed, routine that they've got between them. And so, like, if they don't do a recovery order, there's so much damage that can be done, between the time that they've withheld. Some of them might make false allegations and things like that to authorities, and there can be so much. I guess the child can be worked up to say things and go to the police or write down things like letters that are really hateful, and it's pretty destructive. So you have to really get in there quick with these type of cases because they can get worse rapidly. And the family court is really not the place, but unfortunately it's the only way to sometimes get your children back or get order into their custody arrangement.
So, what sort of professionals should a parent in this situation seek out for support? I mean, lawyer, maybe you can talk a bit more about them, the types of lawyers, kind of the knowledge or specialties that you would advise them to find a lawyer with, or other types of professionals that they can use to support them during this alienation or, separation from their child.
Well, it's really difficult to find somebody that's got a psych law kind of background. I mean, if you can find a lawyer that does have a psych degree, that's beneficial because they've got some knowledge, especially someone who's open to reading the latest research. I've created a massive list of parental alienation research, which I often share the link to. I can give you the link afterwards, that has research on parental alienation. It's got research on when a parent has like a mental disorder, the impact it has on the child. There's factitious disorder, which we see when a parent's trying to, make out that the child has got a medical issue when they don't, or a mental health issue if they don't. or even we see it in the context of schooling. They may think that their child has got like a learning difficulty, and they really push for certain diagnostics done. I mean, there are obviously legitimate cases where there may be medical or educational requirements, but we do see it's quite common in this field where a parent is, there's nothing to support that this child has got these medical problems or difficulties, to the point where this woman had gone to, it was 32 practitioners had been involved in the case with trying to diagnose the child with an illness. You know, that's when you get into like the severe type of cases. Yeah.
Great. So you have resources available and you can share them
Yeah,
with
I
me
do.
in the description that
Yeah.
parents could turn around and ask their lawyer to look at, so that lawyer can also be educated on parental alienation from also a psychological aspect, not just a legal aspect, and really understand what it is.
Yeah, well, I do recommend people, like we've got the website there, you know, is send the link to the lawyer, and, you know, read through it and get a bit of an understanding. And they'll be able to see that there is obviously a link on the website that shows all the research that's behind the work that we do. It's and also on the research list, there's also the first part of the book has got resources, as in books, psych and law books in the very beginning. There's a couple of really good ones. One's an international one by Demosthenes Larandos and William Burnett. Demosthenes Larandos, he's an attorney, US attorney, and a forensic psychologist. He's like he's like, he's the ant's pants when it comes to that. But unfortunately, he's retiring, but he's done extensive work in this space. So there's some great resources by him, which are listed on that research list.
That's great. Yeah, we'll definitely be sure to link that then in the description so parents, families can go to that for support. Are there any specific resources or services you would recommend for children, young adults that feel that they are perhaps a victim of parental alienation?
I just quickly go back. I just want to just
Yeah.
mention about the books. A lot of people go, oh my goodness, the books are so expensive, because some of them are a couple of $100s. If you go into your state library or local library, I've had a lot of parents come back and say that they've been able to have them ordered in. So that's another option if they can't afford to get the books, is that they can approach their library or university library and see if they can gain access to the books. And there's also the National Library. We've got a National Library here in Australia where people can register for free on the National Library, and you can gain access to some of the books with online viewing. So yeah,
Great. That's great.
sorry to jump
Yeah.
back on that, but I thought it was really important information, because it's quite a costly exercise getting lawyers and things like that, you know, engaged to recover your children and things like that. But as for resources for children, we did do a page. We've got a page on our website, which is for young people. It's not for like it's more for like teenagers. It's really difficult because like young people aren't on the internet and they don't have access to, and even some adolescents have got full social media blackout. So,
Mm.
or no access to internet. So it makes it very difficult, because usually the alienating parent or the problematic parent doesn't want the child to have access to outside information to assess what they're going through, you know, or to use any critical thinking, you know. But we
Yeah.
do have under the drop down menu, we've got help for people. We've got a young people section where it sort of goes through and asks them some questions like, you know, feeling stuck, we totally get it, you know, and we sort of explain. I won't go through and read it all now, but there's a lot of questions that they can, you know, and a lot of sentences that they can have a little bit of a think about it. And there's also some little tips down there about prioritizing time and relationships, you know, asking them questions. And we've also got things about healthy boundaries, like
Mhm.
what is a boundary and how do you use them and things like that. And there's also some videos on there about, they call them, instead of cognitive distortions, they call them automatic negative thoughts,
Mm.
ants. And so there's a little video on there about it, which talks about it. And then I go into little sections of unhelpful thinking traps that children can get into. So there's quite a lot. There's quite a lot to scroll down, under the young people section. There's also places in Australia like Kids Helpline. They're helpful as well. They've got phone support and online support. There's a Beyond Blue for young people. I think we've actually got some. We've got some of the links in Australia where to reach out. There's Headspace. There's also 13 Yarn, which is a phone number for Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people, including youth support. Yeah, so there's a few, but not everybody understands alienation dynamics, so it's always best to paint the picture
Yeah.
rather than use the terminology.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's also Find My Parent if they're looking for their parent.
Absolutely.
It's like back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. We have mobile application by my parent, and in reality, you can use this for any family member if you're looking for any family member that's gone missing or been separated for any reason. So think adoption, abduction, alienation, human trafficking, conflict, etc. We branded it as Find My Parent because we really want to make sure that children are able to access the technology and are empowered to reunite with their families. But in reality, it can be used for pretty much any case where families are trying to reunite after separation. So all you have to do is go to our website, download our app. It's for free. We have on the Apple and Android store. And then fill in as much information and add as many pictures as you would like, as you feel comfortable, about yourself. And not just the family member that's missing, but your family in general, your immediate and extended family. Then basically what happens is in the background, our AA technology is looking for matches. So it'll be looking for pictures that match using facial recognition. So imagine, for example, an adult who was adopted at a young age from a foreign country has her baby picture, and then the family back home in whatever country also has that baby picture. They don't speak the same language. They're in two totally different countries. They don't have information about names, etc. It would match those pictures. It also matches based on different languages. So again, let's take a case of adoption where the child has added in their date of birth, their name, etc., all in English. Maybe doesn't have any images, and a family in another country has added in that same information. We're looking for a daughter born on this day in this region, um, in their native language. It would still match. So it's using a mix of data matching and image matching to reconnect families. And the really beautiful thing about it is that's always working in the background. So often when we're talking about missing person cases, police or NGOs may have databases of information, but they have to manually, continually to search for that person. So they have to be reminded, let's go search for this person, see if they're showing up in our database. And their search is limited. You misspell a name, it's not going to work. If you search, you have information in one language and it's being stored in another language, it's not going to match that. I don't think you can really do matching pictures using, an Excel sheet. So, and it's really just matching one piece of information to the same piece of information in the database, whereas our technology is using all the information that's available. So yeah, definitely go download the app. It's available for free for anybody in the world on both on Android and iOS devices.
That's fantastic. Such an amazing ability to be able to match
Mm.
data and pictures and things like that. And we do come across a lot of cases where the child has been abducted internationally and they have just got no idea where the child is. And we've got ones where they're interstate, they don't know where they are, there's been name changes as well, so obviously having that photo recognition is so helpful. it's picking up on facial features and things like that. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're really stepping forward into the new technology that we have today.
And it's a
Yeah, it's
technology we're continuing to improve, right? Obviously, the beauty with technology is that it's not static. So
mm,
when we started it, AI was not a big thing. It's technology advances, and we're also advancing our technology so we can help more people and we can look at different criteria and specific kind of cases.
mm. One thing I was just going to mention in regard to some of the resources and that there's obviously all our resources are free online. They're accessible. We do a lot of infographics and on Facebook, and I do a lot of work on LinkedIn. And one thing people have to be careful of is there are a lot of like coaches out there, and I've heard of people paying exorbitant amounts, like just one parent had paid $12,000, and there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that you're going to reunify with a child because every case is different, every alienating parent is different, so if anyone's sort of promoting themselves as like, that you kind of, that you will reunify with your children, obviously you've got to do what you can, but there's a lot of books and there's a lot of information out there, that you can learn without having to pay excessive amounts of money. I had one person, it was just about 4 months ago, they did a workshop, and they got really worked up, excited that they're going to reach out to their child, and they did, and they end up having a restraining order slapped on them. And it was just devastating. Like, after spending, I think it was like $10,000 to $12,000 that they paid on this program,
Yeah.
and now they've got a restraining order and they can't have any contact with their child. I think it's 2 years.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And there wasn't anything abusive or anything like that. They just used that the way this parent approach was kind of like grooming, like if a parent's trying to buy a present for their child, because they haven't got them in their life, it doesn't mean that they're grooming them. It means that's a normal thing to do with parent-child relationships. There was a number of factors that were used to have this restraining order in place. It's devastating, and then that restraining order is being used at the school and all sorts of things to further alienate the parent, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, just be really careful. And as I said, there's that list that I send around has got yeah, books that are that are quite easy to read and understand. And our website has got so much information. I keep uploading more things and just going, okay, maybe I can cover this topic, and I created an article called Free Space. If people want a lot of insights and tips, I did an article called Free Space. So all you have to do is type my name in, and even Amanda Free Space, it
Yeah.
comes up straight away. And that's just got loads of insights, not just from myself, but other people's experiences too. And there's also research as well, reunification studies, post reunification study that
Mhm.
was done with the University of Tasmania. So yeah, just I guess people get desperate, to have their children back in their life, and they'll pay anything. And just like legal fees, I find there's a lot of people who are actually doing better by self-representing if they have the emotional stability to be able to present their case and keep organized and things like that, and then seek legal advice when you need to. Some people are using AI models. There's a few people who are gurus in creating AI legal models and
Yeah.
helping them set up the chat GBT as if they're a judge,
Yeah.
and come up with precedent cases and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Those are really great tips. So, I mean, obviously you're based out of Australia, but all of the resources on your website are available for free and they would be relevant for anybody who's experiencing this anywhere in the world, I assume, right?
absolutely. Yeah, they're relevant to everyone. Obviously, with the language barrier, I have been looking at to see if we can get a component on our website to be able to translate.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we're using a template. What do you call it? A website template, so it's not that easy. I think once we, yeah, I guess we get bigger, we might be able to afford to
Yeah.
put in a website which you can actually click on what language that you want it translated in, which would be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Well,
Yeah.
anything else that you want to share with our viewers today, Amanda?
Yeah, we have a upcoming conference which is for practitioners we were going to do it on the 10th of October. We've had to put it back to the 31st of October. And we're working on a day for parents as well, like a workshop for targeted parents or other family members or carers who want to participate in the workshop. The practitioner one is basically it's going right into the insights of a targeted child's experience, and also going into some of the research as well. And then we've got a clinical forensic psychologist who will be teaching practitioners on assessing these type of cases.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's very much needed because we've seen across the world people use, as I said, using that high conflict model,
Hmm.
and not assessing these cases thoroughly. You can't possibly assess a case like this in a 1 hour appointment
Yeah.
with a parent and child. And often we're arming parents with questions to ask single experts, to challenge them on how they've assessed cases. So we do some posts on that, and people who claim that they do reunification therapy, questions to ask them. There's posts on
Mhm.
Facebook which you can read about those sort of things. So there's lots of information out there.
Great. And regarding the conferences and workshops, people can find information about those on your website.
They'll be on our Facebook page, and we'll put a
Okay.
link once we get the platform up and going. We'll have a link on our website as well.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
I think this is all very important, very practical advice for parents as they manage, their relationship with their children, their former spouse, etc. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and experience with the audience.
No, you're welcome. I also want to make sure that, parents, put their life vest on in a way, like that they have lots of self-care in their routines, eating healthy, getting enough sleep, not doing too much social media. There's a bit of a vortex online when you start searching parental alienation, and you might find that you may get dragged into that vortex and spend hours and hours online and discussing your situation with everyone. The best thing is to seek a counselor or, a therapist or a friend that you can trust, and, rather than sitting online and not getting enough sleep. You can't think straight when you're not sleeping well, or you're not eating well, or you're not exercising. So self-care is like putting on a life vest, basically. I always like
Yeah.
to end it off on that to make sure that people do look after themselves.
No, it's
Because if
it's a
you're not
very
looking
good
after
point.
yourself, how can you save your child? You know?
It's a good point. Obviously, it's for to so you need to take care of yourself, full stop, period. But also, I hear a lot from parents who have been reunited is they want their children to see the best version of them, of their parent, right? And that is very important. Children don't want to come back to a parent that is angry, upset,
Mm,
unhappy, not in a good place emotionally, or in their lives. So children much rather come back to a parent that
mm.
is doing well, whether that's in their career, their personal life, their emotional well-being. And so by taking care of yourself, you're not only doing a service to yourself, but you're doing a service to your children now and for when that reunification hopefully happens.
Yeah, and you're not opening up the floodgates on your child because they've got their own journey and pain that
Yeah.
they've experienced, and you're not keeping that pushing your version of the
Yeah.
story, because usually children in these situations, or not usually, pretty much always children in these situations just want the pain to go away and just things how they were when they were good,
Yeah.
recover that authentic parent and authentic child and move forward from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The parents that have reunited and gone on to have positive relationships with their children, I've found that most of them seek support and advice from a psychologist, potentially a child psychologist before the unification. They do not go in without a plan. They have a plan of how they're going to
Mhm.
be emotionally stable, maybe not cry in front of the child, definitely not start talking about the situation, making accusations against the other parent as much as they want to. They go in with a plan, and that's when the children seem to feel the most comfortable and are open to rebuilding that relationship. So I think that also is very important. When and if you get closer to unification, you need to go in strategically and know how you need to act and what you need to say, and most importantly, what not to say and how not to act so you do not put that relationship further at risk.
Yeah, I've put a lot of those sort of tips in my free space article as
Mm.
well. There's a lot of insights in there. I was just gonna, there was something that was in the back of my mind. Oh, when you've had, many years or whether it's months apart from your child, there is going to be grief that comes up, and there are those losses. So it's not like, you're pushing it down and going, oh, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to, because you're definitely going to have moments where, you know, I can give a quick little example. It's like, when a memory pops up with myself and my daughter or my son, and we'd be talking about something, but then there seems to be a moment where we pause, and it's like almost like you get this lump in your throat,
Mm.
and it's just like that was just so unfair what happened, and we can feel it, and we go, okay, let's talk about something else, or let's go
Mm.
for a walk or do something nice. But we've felt that moment together, and it's painful, but we've acknowledged it, and we're now going to, do something that's nice, a self-care activity of some sort.
Yeah.
Because it's very real. The pain is, and the suffering is unbelievable, for so many people in these situations.
Well, we'll be sure to upload all of those links to the description so parents can go and check this, the resources available, practical resources that they can use every day as they navigate, parental alienation situations or abduction cases.
Mm, that's excellent. I'll make sure I get all those little links through to you.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on your
Thank you.
podcast.